game is stacking up to potentially be, in my opinion, one of the most interesting twists on the constantly evolving subgenre of realism-focused tactical shooters. At first simply compared to everything from Escape from Tarkov, DayZ, and Arma, to Far Cry, Stalker, Ghost Recon Wildlands, or even smaller scale games like Ready or Not or Ground Branch, we finally have an idea of what this game really is. The thing is, basically everyone was kind of right, but no one has really understood, until now, just how unique and interesting this game really is, or could be. A couple of weeks ago, I and many other content creators were invited to sit down and take a dive into Gray Zone Warfare with the head dev Mara, the CEO of Madfinger Games. I'm not gonna lie, prior to this meeting, not much of the game had been shown, and while they had absolutely piqued my interest with the trailers, I was ready to sit down in this meeting, get shown a slideshow of screenshots, maybe a short gameplay clip or a new trailer, alongside a quick rundown of the core gameplay mechanics, and the devs would send us on our way with an embargo date. What we got instead was not only unexpected, but honestly quite funny. Essentially, we sat down and Mara, in his lovely thick Czech accent, goes, "Okay, so you guys know that scam game The Day Before?" Honestly, hearing this right out of the gate really made me chuckle. If you're unaware, The Day Before was one of the most anticipated video games of all time, a supposed open-world genre-defining zombie MMO, which, after quietly showing zero gameplay to back up its promised claims, released as possibly one of the most underwhelming and borderline criminally low-quality excuses for a game that I've ever seen, and the studio shuttered just days after release. Long story short, it was a glorious dumpster fire, and I'm sure that many, if not all of us sitting down at this meeting, had exactly that on our minds. Please don't let Gray Zone be like this. Please not another Day Before. To not mention at all would have been, well, professional and courteous, but to be honest, it seemed like the existence of The Day Before kind of pissed Mara off. Indie devs already have it pretty tough. They have to prove to the industry that they have something worth investing in, and when the biggest, most anticipated indie project in years turns out to be a scam, that has gotta hurt. Anyway, Mara popped into the meeting and right off the bat addressed the elephant in the room. "We want to show you that we are not some scam game like The Day Before," he says, and turns on his stream to show us the pause menu of Gray Zone Warfare. Here's essentially what we saw of the game, starting off with the most basic, the core idea of what Gray Zone Warfare is. Firstly, it is not an extraction shooter. Like, not at all. I guess if your criteria of an extraction shooter is that you loot and extract from the map, then yes, technically it has those criteria. But in my opinion, it's much more interesting and complex than that. Firstly, and I think that this is actually really important to help you wrap your head around what this game is, it's based on Roadside Picnic, the Soviet novel by the brothers Strugatsky, from which the film Stalker is based. Yes, that Stalker. Basically, the novel was written in 1971 and describes stalkers as people who illegally navigate the Forbidden Zones, which were visited by extraterrestrials, in order to collect artifacts. The film Stalker, also written by the brothers Strugatsky and directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, follows loosely the same ideas. Stalker, the film, was released in 1982, 4 years before the Chernobyl disaster. The word stalker, taken from the book and film, was appropriated by the urban exploration community, and people who venture into the zone at Pripyat to this day still call themselves stalkers. The Ukrainian game series Stalker wraps the eerily similar fiction and reality of the Chernobyl disaster, the book, and the film into an open-world survival shooter, which is largely responsible for popularizing the subgenre and remains wildly beloved to this day. So, Gray Zone Warfare is based on that same book, not on the movie Stalker and not on the game Stalker. I want to make that very clear because they are not the same thing, but it will help you organize in your head the kind of ideas the core of this game was formulated on. The zone, in this case, is the quarantine area on Lamang Island, a small country in Southeast Asia based largely on the country of Laos, according to the devs. After a mysterious event wreaks havoc on the island, the UN blockades the area, forbidding any one country from sending military or humanitarian aid into the zone for fear of an international conflict. PMCs, or private military companies with morally gray motives, set up bases on opposing sides of the zone, all sending operators towards the epicenter of the disaster in order to take control and hopefully score big on the secrets found within. The lore is much more complex than that, so check out my lore video that I just posted if you're interested on the deeper aspects of that. What this means for how the game works is, you pick a PMC, one of 3, and you are stationed at one of these fobs on each opposing side of the zone. Again, I can't show you the imagery that we saw, but there were 2 sort of at the top and 1 at the bottom. They weren't exactly equidistant. Scattered around the edges of the map were a number of LZs, or landing zones. This is how you'll get in and out of the map, hop onto a little bird, which will take you to an LZ, then go out, complete your mission and whatever, head back to an LZ, call the little bird, and wait for it to pick you up. There's no limit to the amount of time that you can be out on the island, but the longer you're out there, the bigger risk, of course. The only way to secure gear that you have on you out on the island is to take it back to your base, which cannot be raided by opposing teams, by the way. A little further into the jungle from the fobs are a bunch of small settlements or towns, and then at the center is the deep jungle, with Ground Zero, the site of the event, at the very, very middle. The only things actually marked on the map were the names of the settlements, towns, or military facilities. We could also see the location of the 3 bases and the LZs that each team will use. I'll talk about teams in a second, but in the actual game, you won't be able to see those bases or landing zones in your map in-game. It was just part of the demo. On another screen of the menu were the traders. There were 6 of them that we could see, but Mara made it very clear that you will not start with all of these unlocked. The first few were an ex-American gunnery sergeant, who sort of introduces you to the island and seems to give you starter quests, a local mechanic, who has her own own deep ties to the conflict in the region, and a guy hired by the PMCs who is outwardly altruistic but may have ulterior motives. The other traders that we saw seem to have connections with some of the deeper or more late game lore, so it would make sense that you would need to unlock them over time. All traders had this 3D in-engine model, but Mara made it very clear that this was basically the extent of cinematics for the game. There will be no cutscenes or set-piece moments. They want the story of the game to be told entirely through in-map environmental storytelling and the text from the quests. The story will be subtle and complex, but importantly, it will be totally possible for players to just complete missions and entirely miss the story. For those who are interested, go looking and you'll piece together very intriguing things hidden around the island. As for the missions and the traders themselves, if you've played Stalker or Escape from Tarkov, you'll get it pretty quick. You do missions for them and they give you stuff in return, either unlocks, cash, or straight gear and weapons. What you'll do in the game, at least upon release of early access, is team up with a squad of 4, choose your missions and gear up, and head out onto the island. There will be no waypoints or markers to tell you how or where to complete a mission. You will have to figure that out for yourself. Fans of Escape from Tarkov will be used to this, but for people unfamiliar, here's an example. One mission from Artisan simply reads, "Find out what happened to Father." The task description is, pick up evidence from the White House and bring the evidence back. That's it. Mara made it very clear that this is a game geared towards mature players and that they will not be dumbing it down. He also said that because of the open-ended nature of the quests and the fact that depending on your PMC faction, you'll be on totally opposite sides of the map from others, a mission that is a simple 10-minute walk in the park for one person could be extremely difficult for another person, especially taking into consideration the wildcards of AI. But real quick, let's talk about teams, or PMC factions, for a second. There are 3, and each of them will be comprised of 4 squads of 4, totaling 16 to a team, or a total of 48 players on the map. We were told that as of now, the location of each team's base will be the only difference between the 3 PMCs. This will change in the future, but as of now, they all have access to the same traders, same gear, same quests. Okay, so let's talk about the thing that I know is on everybody's mind now, PvP. To put it simply, it's part of the game and it's intended to be part of the game. But when I listed all those games at the start of the video, I meant it when I said that Gray Zone Warfare is a mix of all of them. While PvP is a part of the game, it's not the focus, and it will be possible, and sometimes absolutely the right move, to avoid it entirely. Here's a big detail. There will never be any quests requiring you to kill a PMC. You can play through the whole story, it seems, without ever killing a PMC. However, MFG are adamant that they want the path of your PMC to be driven entirely by your decisions and who you are as a person. The 3 PMC factions stationed on Lamang aren't enemies, but they are in conflict with one another in the sense that they all have the same goals. If you're the kind of person that wants to let an opposing squad of PMCs pass on their merry way while you're in the middle of questing, you can do that. If you want to go on the hunt for PMCs to steal their gear, you can do that. It's all entirely up to the player who will, if they make the wrong decision, have to face the potentially devastating consequences of doing so. As far as PvE goes, you're going to run into it a lot. They plan to get 1,000 AI running on any given server at a time. We know that from the lore, there are a number of AI factions, bandits, pirates, or gangs, each with their own motives, goals, and alliances, as well as the Lamang military, who are stationed at various high-profile locations to guard them from the aforementioned bandits. It's quite possible that we see AI faction on faction warfare like in Stalker or many other open-world RPGs. The PvE will get more challenging the closer that you get to the center of the map. Each area will be rated from 1 to 5 on a scale of difficulty. Unfortunately, you can no longer rate this video from 1 to 5 stars, but you can hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Anyway, the enemies will be tiered. AI might go from being a couple dudes in flip-flops with AKs to fully armored military-equipped soldier AI. We don't know exactly how the difficulty of these enemies will scale, but we do know that no matter what, every human character will have the same base health, whether player or AI. No bullet sponges, just varying degrees of difficulty when it comes to how effective the AI are in combat, it seems. Personally, that last bit is one of the best things that I heard this entire presentation. There is nothing that pulls me out of the immersion of an open world PvE game more than shooting a guy in the head 15 times to bring him down. The AI seems to be a big focus. MFG devs I talked to are adamant that the game is to be presented as PvEVP. The E comes first, as in you'll be fighting the environment a lot more than you will be fighting other players. As far as taking them on, the devs have said that they will not be pushovers or just a way to pass the time on the way to PvP. They are intended to be a legitimate challenge, enough so that venturing out into the zone by yourself will be greatly dissuaded. Having at least one person to watch your back, provide cover, or, should you go down, provide first aid is going to be seriously important. On that note, let's talk about the health system because it's insane. A comment left on one of my videos on GCW a while back made a great comparison actually. The health system in this game is a lot like the damage system in War Thunder, but for the human body. Here's how Mara broke it down. The body is segmented into limbs, the upper and lower arms, thorax, abdomen, neck, head, etc. We've all seen this before. But then within the body, we can see bones, organs, basically everything that should be there. On the demo screen we saw, you could actually see what looked like arrows for where you could turn the 3D model around to inspect the body from all sides, which you very well may need to do, because here's what happens when you get shot. Based on the kinetic energy energy of the projectile, the velocity it's traveling, and how it interacts with the various armor and clothing materials and then the flesh underneath, it will create a cavity. This can lead to loss of blood, which will cause weakness or dizziness if over 15% of the blood is lost, or with enough energy, the projectile may break bones or cause damage to the organs. If over 50% of the blood is lost, the player will enter a coma. Another player will then have 2 minutes to stop the bleeding and administer a blood transfusion, or the player will die. If a vital organ is damaged enough, the player will die. So, yeah, this might be one of the most complex and in-depth health systems that I've ever seen in a game that is not literally a simulator. Every consumable item that we saw seemed to have its own animation, and we could actually see the player character begin to get dizzy from lack of hydration as Mara stood with his character in the middle of the street while he was talking. However insane all of this may sound, Mara made it clear that the healing system was, at the end of the day, gamified, and was about experiencing the intensity and reality of a combat situation in as fun of a way as possible. He made the joke that if the game were truly realistic, one would have to be sent to the hospital to recover for 3 months, or that damage to the brain would permanently hinder the player's coordination or intelligence. So they know what they're doing here. What it seems like is that MFG want to, by creating a complex and involved health system, create combat scenarios where decision making is actually key. Rash, risky, or haphazard plays are potentially devastating, and players are rewarded for their planning, coordination, and intelligence. The tagline that the devs have used over and over again in the materials that they've sent us is "every move matters," and I think that everything that we saw in this demo points towards a game developed with this concept as a core tenet. Every move matters.
Every move matters.
Every move matters.
So much of the shooter genre, even the tactical or quote realistic military simulator ones, revolve around portraying tactical combat or operator aesthetics in a gritty and grounded feeling way, while essentially bypassing, if possible, the requirement that the player actually make tough decisions they come to regret. At the end of the day, people get on games mostly to have fun, to have some sort of power fantasy, or for a sort of release into an otherwise unobtainable experience. If MFG are successful in what they're trying to do, I actually think that they are doing the same thing with Grey Zone Warfare. This game isn't just being designed to be the most punishing game you've ever played. What it is trying to do is set as close to real-world parameters as possible for what warfare is really like in the modern day for a private military contractor. Not a lone loot-hungry gunman like the PMCs of Escape from Tarkov, or a badass operator assassin like what we see portrayed in more mainstream gaming media. Rather, it sets the rules in place, says, here are your goals, here's what might get in your way, here are the risks involved. How each person faces that will rely entirely on who the person behind the gun is, and what decisions they decide to make. Whether to shoot, whether to hold fire, whether to kill or make someone surrender, whether to heal yourself or a bleeding squad mate first, or whether to abandon an ally in order to save one's own life. Every move will matter, or at the very least, have an irreversible outcome. I'm mostly stuck to talking about what we saw of the game itself here, to give you an idea of what Grey Zone Warfare will be. Real quick though, I do want to touch on the devs themselves, and some of the questions or concerns that I might have about what I saw. Firstly, if you're at all hesitant about what you just heard, given the recent track record of ambitious indie titles, you should be, but I think it's important to note how good MFG's track record is. This is an independent developer founded over 10 years ago with multiple award-winning shipped titles under its belt, and a community of longtime fans. Every video that I've made mentioning Madfinger Games in relation to Grey Zone Warfare has garnered a number of comments from people pleasantly surprised to hear their name pop up, having played and greatly enjoyed their mobile titles over the years. I really want to point out that this is not anything to scoff at. In the PC gaming space, mentions of mobile gaming brings forth everything from tentative wariness to downright negativity. Setting aside the superiority complex of PC gamers, there is an idea that mobile gaming in some way represents a dilution of the art of video games, that they are platforms to sell children's skins and coin packs, stripping away the soul that gamers find so dear to them. I want to address firstly the issue of monetization, as many, myself included, have argued microtransactions of any kind are a very slippery slope when it comes to the tactical loot-based shooter or extraction genre. Well, a recent Q&A has confirmed that the game will be a premium title, aka a paid game, with no microtransactions. Can't say that I am not very happy to hear that. Secondly, some may be wary of a PC title as ambitious as this being developed by a studio known for mobile games. Well, I did my research here, and MFG's team does not have a one-track background. We have multiple developers and staff with well-known ship titles under their belts, everything from Mafia 2 and 3 to Kingdom Come Deliverance, as well as alumni of Bohemia Interactive, the developer of Arma and DayZ. It's safe to say that unlike some ambitious titles we've seen come and go recently, these devs are real, they have a reputation to uphold, and they are taking this project very seriously. A great sign of this can be found in the degree of openness that they've had with their community since the announcement of Grey Zone. While engaging with content creators in the community is obviously a boon to their own marketing, the fact that they seem so utterly open to suggestion, criticism, and feedback is a very, very good sign, especially when it comes to what kind of game they're trying to build here. Mara made a very clear point that they will not be spending exorbitant amounts of money on marketing the game. There will be no CG trailers, no grand events. Every bit of money that they have is going towards developing the game in one way or another. I do want to touch on one thing. We did not get a look at combat or player versus player interactions of any kind during the demo, and what we saw of the gameplay was very limited. The lack of live gameplay footage we've gotten of GCW is in a way both concerning and reassuring. On the one hand, the more that we see of the game, and obviously the sooner we can actually get our hands on it, the sooner we can give feedback on how it feels and where it needs to grow. On the other hand, Mara was very open that they did not have 48 players running on the map in a stable build, that if they did, the build would be out publicly for us to play. The more that I've talked with the devs, the more I get the impression that they're very serious about building something interesting here, and that when they have something resembling even the most basic gameplay loop, they want us to get in and give feedback. And they are very honest about where they're at with developing the game. We have to remember that not only is this an indie team of around 80 people, but they are still only about 2 years into development. We are looking at sometime in spring of 2024 for the first early access build to go public, but honestly, I just want them to take their time and do what they need to do, and I'm sure that many people feel similarly. One last very interesting aspect of the development comes from MFG's collaboration with Dr. Sean McFate. McFate is an author, military strategist, and defense expert, but most importantly, an ex-PMC. McFate entered the private contracting world after service as U.S. Army paratrooper. Working first with U.S. government contracts and then freelance on various corporate contracts worldwide, he brings a uniquely experienced perspective on what PMCs actually operate like and what would happen if, say, multiple PMCs found themselves at odds with each other in a conflict zone. The name of the game, Gray Zone Warfare, is actually an international relations term to describe the difficult state of conflict between peace and traditional war. There's a whole conversation to be had here about how McFate's expertise on defense, terrorism, and global conflict led to the development of Gray Zone Warfare, the game, but I will save that for an entire another video. I hope that this video began to paint a clear picture to people about not only what kind of game Gray Zone Warfare actually is, but of the intricacies that make it so interesting to me personally, and I'm sure so many others out there. Thanks for watching. I tried to break down the details of what I saw in this behind closed doors discussion as well as I could, but if you want to see my interpretation of the backstory and lore of the game, check out the video that's on screen right now. If you made it this far into the video, prove it to me by using the salute emoji in a comment, or using the word salute. If you want to support, you can of course subscribe if you haven't yet, or leave a like if you just want to be a super swell person. I'm going to be talking about this game much more, as well as of course dropping some more long-form lore content about other games in the near future. Until then, cheers, and I will see you soon.